Destiny and fate have a funny way of drawing a person into their reality, no matter how much someone tries to run away. The Star Wars franchise has been rooted in the idea of a person being drawn to their true being, including destroying an entire galactic menace. Developer Respawn embraced the idea of a lone Jedi attempting to hide his true identity. Players moved from the scrapyard into the middle of a war that could change the course of the entire universe, and yours truly enjoyed a majority of what Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order had to offer. So when the inevitable sequel got announced, excitement was at a reasonably high level, especially with the developer's promise of expanding the explorable universe. Sadly, Star Wars Jedi Survivor got off to a rocky start in regards to its technical performance, giving me every reason to wait a little while before picking it up with the hopes of major and minor issues being ironed out in fast fashion. "5 years after the Great Jedi Purge that resulted in people with the Force being massacred as the Galactic Empire flourished, the player took control of a simple scrapper salvaging ships from the Clone Wars in Fallen Order. Cal's group of eventual rebels fought the Empire and picked up a minor victory at the end of the previous game. But another half-decade later would see Cal's ragtag posse disbanded, and trying to stop the inevitable galactic takeover was spread across planets and philosophies. Survivor's main narrative lasts around 20 to 25 hours on normal or Jedi Knight difficulty, with the harder difficulty levels obviously adding some time to anyone's playthrough. Beyond simply playing through the story, is this game featuring side quests presenting hidden areas, rather interesting puzzles usually focused on moving an object to, say, burn away a wall of briars, legendary beasts that aren't as numerous in regards to differing physical features, and a copious amount of collectibles housed in containers, attainable thanks to Cal's small droid friend BD-1, and deep in the heart of chambers ready to tax a person's idea of what should or shouldn't fit together. With certain Jedi powers needed to open particular areas, a lot of backtracking and planet hopping is needed for anyone looking to 100% complete the game. Sadly for yours truly, some 2 months after the game's release, full completion is still out of the question due to a glitch that prevents me from completing the newly implemented bounties, where unique enemies arrive in particular sections needing to be put down. The glitch, the only major one I suffered, as I was able to get all of the collectibles, overcome rivals in the Holo Tactics tabletop game, and finish every main story mission. The bounties glitch is supposed to be fixed soon, but it seems like the only possible way to get past it is to replay the game via New Game Plus, with the possibility of the glitch happening again as it has for others. After having his world be turned asunder by the Galactic Empire, failed Padawan Cal quickly finds himself in the figurative and at times literal belly of the beast thanks to the game's overall combat. Cal is mostly the same fighter he was when Fallen Order ended, with foes presenting a good level of challenge early, as if the developers wanted players to embrace the fact that this is a true sequel to a game where the protagonist didn't suffer from combat amnesia between games. Originally sporting only a lightsaber, Cal can still dodge, block, and even deflect using his grand weapon of choice, with the player having to learn enemy patterns, be it against the Yeti, bear hug-loving androids, and the tough-as-nails bosses that show up rather infrequently, but leave a lasting impression mostly due to how many times the player will have to respawn and try again. Legendary beasts somewhat make up for the lack of narrative-driven major foes. There's a gratifying feeling of learning from one's mistakes and being able to overcome enemies both large and small, with the latter usually being stormtroopers, who will take a one-hit kill if Cal properly deflects an energy beam at the right time. On higher difficulties, the parry time is reduced, making it riskier to counter an incoming attack. Upon dying at the hands of any enemy, Cal will return looking for revenge, as dealing damage to the highlighted enemy responsible for sending Cal back to the most previous checkpoint will return all of his lost experience points while providing him full health and force bars. The biggest addition to Jedi's combat is the addition of equipable stances. Beyond the single and double-bladed lightsaber options is the returning dual-wield where Cal disconnects a double-bladed lightsaber to fight with two single blades at the same time. The most impressive additions to the stances are the blaster and crossguard, with the latter providing a broadsword-like counter-based stance, where Cal really has to put his weight into a lightsaber swing before potentially landing said strike. Blaster is arguably the best stance with the addition of a gun alongside Cal's lightsaber, so Kestis can mix short-range melee strikes with long-range firing. Blaster rounds only fill up if Cal lands those melee strikes, with regular gunshots taking 1 round, while a charged shot utilizes 2 rounds from the chamber. Though it may sound disappointing not having unlimited rounds when it comes to regular shots, refilling Cal's blaster with ammo is rarely difficult to manage with the amount of enemies usually thrust upon him at one time. The biggest flaw with stances isn't the actual combat options, but the limitations of only having 2 equipped at one time, with the player only being able to change stances at meditation points, instead of say using a menu wheel so players can freely change between stances anytime in combat. This decision to limit players may result in players sticking with a pair of stances and never really experimenting. With each enemy killed, collectible found, and area discovered, Cal gains points used to purchase skills in the 3 skill trees. Survival, focusing on improving Cal's health and defense, lightsaber that provides various abilities for the melee stances, and force for those supernatural powers only a Jedi can produce. These skills can only be purchased at meditation points scattered across every map and in the Mantis ship, the main tool for planetary travel. Resting at these meditation points restores Cal's health, but all the enemies in the area respawn, forcing the player to decide whether or not they want to take on a purge trooper that gave the player a hard time minutes earlier, as Cal will more than likely have to backtrack. Unlike skills, the new perk system is rooted in exploration, as the majority of the perk slots are discovered through certain cerebral puzzles. The perks themselves, which take up a dedicated number of slots instead of each perk simply occupying 1 slot, are both found and purchased. Perks also can only be changed at meditation points. As noted earlier, Cal does possess a force bar that, during battle, allows for him to mix up his lightsaber attacks alongside the 3 force abilities unlocked throughout the narrative. Push to shove adversaries backwards, pull for a potentially get over here situation so Cal can strike down said enemy, and the newly implemented confusion, where the player temporarily turns a susceptible adversary against their own team. While not the most impressive list of powers, they all work incredibly well in the heat of battle, including shoving a foe to their death when standing too close to an edge, or upgrading confusion to make short-term allies of more than 1 enemy at a time. The slow force ability from the first game gets relegated to a meter that fills up when performing successful attacks. When activating slow, everything in the area surrounding Cal expectedly moves at a snail's pace, while Kestis can slash off enemy body parts at his normal speed. Very late in the game, the slow ability gets a significant boost in how much damage Cal can dish out. Another big compliment to the game's combat system is BD-1. The little droid can not only help with collectibles, BD-1 also provides health stems when the player calls for one by hitting up on the directional pad. BD-1 can also hijack certain mechanical enemies when Cal chops off a good amount of that foe's health. Expanding BD-1's abilities plays into traversing every planet as well, including an electrified dart that starts malfunctioning electric boxes, and shooting flammable rocks to ignite barriers via light ray shining orbs. BD-1 isn't the only ally Cal has, with certain narrative sections allowing the addition of newcomer Bodhi and the returning Marin being semi-controllable combat partners, whose helpful abilities work on a cooldown timer. Cal's force powers play a major role in traversing the multiple planets offered for the player to explore at almost any time, though certain planets are obviously structured to be fully experienced later due to the tougher enemies and major areas being blocked off when Cal lacks the necessary powers, including a new air dash ability that not only gives him the chance to make a harrowing jump, but also move through colored shields once impossible without shutting them off in the first game. The most beefy planets are Kobo and Jeddah, with the latter's desert environment presenting different collectibles and obviously enemies. Kobo proves to be the most important planet for side stuff, mostly thanks to the Pyloon Saloon, where players can fill up the bar by meeting certain NPCs and convincing them to avoid the dangers of the Empire inside this Grease-owned cantina. Some of the NPCs will be responsible for giving Cal certain side quests. Help him find collectibles like a very mouthy fisherman who loves diving for sea creatures that will be added to the saloon's fish tank, or a bounty hunter that may or may not prevent full completion by not talking to Cal. Koboh also sports meditation chambers for those puzzle-loving gamers who also want more perks and discover a slew of collectibles. Hidden deep within Koboh and other planets are force tears, optional challenges split between combat and traversal sequences, with the latter being arguably the most difficult task due to how wild some of the maneuvering can get that will push the player's reactionary time to the limit while fighting the camera and at times Cal's stiff maneuvering in midair. Though moving throughout the planets gives some interesting and helpful collectibles, a majority of the game's optional obtainables are customizable items associated with Cal's clothing, weapons, and even BD1. None of these customizable collectibles have stats associated with them, so the player can mix and match items to their heart's content without a worry about losing damage buffs or an increased parry window, qualities solely associated with the perk system. One of the previous game's biggest woes was the 3D map, that didn't offer much in the way of giving players a true understanding of how the world ahead or behind them was laid out. Though there are some slight improvements, including an on-screen guideline when pulling up the map, and certain alerts about inaccessible areas, the map is still rather confusing and downright useless depending on the section. The biggest positive change regarding the map is the addition of fast travel at and to any meditation point discovered. If Fallen Order's story was about a Jedi everyman discovering their worth alongside a group of like-minded individuals, Survivor's narrative shows how easily things can fall apart when that alliance isn't what it used to be. There are more compromises made throughout the story to both what the protagonists are trying to accomplish and what must be done to get what they need, including Cal using his force powers to manipulate foes into giving him what Kestis needs at that moment. Sadly, the biggest issue with the narrative is how expansive the world itself is, with a good chunk of the story being rooted in simply moving through new areas while Cal, and potentially an ally, discover what they're looking for either isn't where they thought it would be, or they need to go somewhere else because they need a particular item to get the original object to work properly. It really isn't until the last few chapters that some significant memorable story moments happen, being the exact opposite of how the game doesn't wait to give players a challenge when it comes to combat. The technical issues are what hamper Survivor from attaining a high recommendation, some 2 months after its release. Beyond the inconsistent bugs that may or may not break someone's playthrough, such as the aforementioned bounties not registering, frame rate drops, hard crashes, infinite loading screens, graphical glitches, and hit detection issues plague Cal's adventures while playing on a PS5. Thankfully, the voice acting, music, and when the visuals work properly are fantastic. For fans of Fallen Order, Survivor does mostly everything better from the combat to the world exploration. While an argument can be made the narrative presentation is definitely weaker this time around, with it feeling like a stopgap between story bookends. Survivor's biggest problem is its unpredictability in regards to technical inconsistencies that hopefully gets fixed, even though the game already has the negative stigma of being a broken experience. Like its prequel, there's a lot to enjoy about Survivor, especially when someone is experiencing the best the game has to offer when engaged in combat, or is happy to explore closed-off areas later in the game when Cal has all of his powers. Depending on the difficulty level being played, it will be a true testament of one's twitch and reaction skills. Survivor's plot, featuring more of a slow burn until the last act, is solid, but doesn't feel as extraordinary as it could have been, with the expansive worlds being a bigger deal than the plot a majority of the time. The game's technical shortcomings are Survivor's biggest flaw, and something that makes the game impossible to recommend until a majority of them are fixed across every system, with PC gamers, as per the norm, having the worst port of the bunch. Fans of Fallen Order and or action-adventure gamers will find a lot to love about Survivor, even if someone isn't a Star Wars fan, but only when the game wants to cooperate. and isn't fumbling the opportunity like a droid with a grenade.
This here! The Rancor? Really? They're going all out.
Get over here, you. Hello. Focus on the battle. Get on.
Let's fight together.
Direct hit.
Activate horse.